Naturalist and East Bay native Glen Schneider grew up in a Diablo Valley nursery family. He was a native plant garden landscape designer and builder for more than 40 years. So it's my pleasure now to introduce my longtime colleague and friend, Glen Schneider.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I know a lot of people in the audience, and hi to Kathy. We've known each other a long time. So my name is Glen Schneider, and like she said, I grew up in the East Bay. I was born in Berkeley, but my folks were country people from Sonoma County. They came down here during the Depression, and they moved out through the tunnel beyond Lafayette on the far side of Briones Park in 1939. They couldn't see another house, and we farmed pears, and my family ran Orchard Nursery in Lafayette for 25 years, so I'm sure some of you have visited there. And then we sold that to the Courtrights many years ago. They're the family that runs East Bay Nursery in Berkeley on San Pablo. Anyway, I was lucky. My mom's older sister, she was on a chicken ranch in Petaluma, and Vanette went to Santa Rosa JC. Then she came down to Cal. This was in 1933. Tuition was $35 a year. And she studied with Willis Lynn Jepson, and she was a 5'8". She taught at John Muir School for a couple years, went back to Santa Rosa, and she was the herbarium assistant in the Santa Rosa JC herbarium for 40 years with Milo Baker, who was kind of like Mr. Botany for the North Coast. So and then growing up in a nursery family, I drew some lucky cards. So what we talked about at the dinner time was how the business is going and plants. But I started out in what I call I kind of see gardening, landscaping as a great rainbow. And on one side, you're going to have the very formal business of French gardening, and if you've ever been over to San Francisco, you see the clock, that they have with the marigolds and everything, and then all the way over to what I ended up at is, habitat gardening, wildland gardening. So I grew up with the Japanese maples and the rhododendrons, the peat moss, the water, the pesticides, all the rest of that. And when I started landscaping, it was California native plants, but what does that really mean? Is that yuccas? Is that Joshua tree? Is that redwoods? And over the course of many years, many decades, I ended up with local native plants. And so that's what I did with gardens. And I learned that if you plant small plants, very small plants, you're wasting your money if you buy gallon cans, in my opinion. You buy the real small ones in tubes, you plant them in January, you give them a shot of water, and basically, that's it. Local plants love the native soil. They love it. So the afternoon, I can see the flow here. We're going from gardens to urbanscapes to cities to schools, and now we're going to go to wildland. So, I started the Skyline Gardens project in 2016, and let's see, it's on East Bay Mudland. And here we go. So Skyline Gardens Restoration Project, the title of this talk, From Weeds to Wildflowers. We're sponsored by the East Bay chapter of the California Native Plant Society. And we have a great collaboration with East Bay Mud. So all of our water for the East Bay comes from East Bay Mud. So we're working on East Bay Mud watershed land. And their watershed unit are the best people in the world to work with, because the leadership has all started as rangers with their hands in the dirt, and they've worked up to management. They understand everything, and they pride themselves on being the no red tape arm of East Bay Mud. So anyway, they're great people. So where are we? This is a map here of the Skyline Trail. It's a Skyline National Recreation Trail, East Bay Skyline National Recreation Trail. It is so national, it goes all the way from Castro Valley to Richmond. And the trail was built to connect Tilden Park from the steam trains area down to Sibley Park, Sibley Volcanic Park. And this is the upper part. This is 1.5 miles of the Skyline Trail here. You can see the steam trains up there, and it goes down to the Berkeley Hills Reservoir. And each dot represents a native plant species that's along that trail. There are 170 native plant species in 1.25 miles of trail. the red dots are groves of things. So we have things like trillium and leatherwood and just, so it's a Noah's Ark of native plants. It's just incredible what grows there. And I first discovered this 30 years ago when my daughter and I decided, she was 11, we decided we would walk from our house in central Berkeley near City Hall to Grandma and Grandpa's house near Akalani's High School, which is where I went to high school, in one day. And we did it. We left at 7:30 in the morning. We arrived at 11:30 at night. It was 21 miles, 6,000 feet up and down, and I discovered this trail. And my daughter today is a senior environmental scientist with the California State Parks, and she's in charge of the health of the vegetation plants in Sonoma, Marin, and Napa counties. So how's that for the fruit falling close to the tree? Okay. Here's another just cut through. You can see the ridge up there. So can you see the Caldecott Tunnel in the middle? So this is on the east side of the Caldecott. When you go through the tunnel heading towards Orinda, you look up at that ridge, and I've driven that, 500 times, and I used to say, that is the most godforsaken piece of the East Bay. Well, it turns out to be the most botanically diverse part of the East Bay. So anyway, we work along the ridge there. It's all volcanic. You see those red-orange zones there. That's all volcanic that's been crushed by the pushing of the plates. And so it's very, very steep up there. It's the highest rainfall area in the East Bay, 34 inches a year. And so we get plants from the North Coast like huckleberry, and we get plants from Southern California like chia and some of those really rocky scree plants. And Kathy put together a little montage of wildflowers here from Skyline Gardens. So I'm just going to show these to kind of get you in the mood. So columbine and buttercups, blue dicks, wood fern. Up at the top there is cow parsnips, or we actually renamed that western lace plant. I think that's a better name for it. Jepson himself, by the way, confessed that he made up about a third of the California native common names, so things like tidy tips, baby blue eyes, that's probably all Jepson, because our culture came from a different place, and it would be great to relearn the names of the first peoples here and bring those back. So I'm all in favor of it. Checker mallow, fiddlenecks over there, is that chia? And woolly sunflower, paintbrush, tidy tips. We'll get more tidy tips. And silver lupin, you might not be able to see that. That's our hat here. We had to have a hat. And by the way, it's all volunteer. If you come out 6 times, you get a free hat. So best swag in town. So this is an area that we started restoring in the year 2020. This was when COVID hit. A lot of people were coming out to the parks, and we call this the swale. And this is basically your typical California grassland. Now, at this point, I think I want to read a little sentence. This is from Aldo Leopold, Sand County Almanac. How many people have heard that or read that? Yeah, okay, the whole room. Okay. One of the penalties of an ecological education is that one lives in a world of wounds. One of the penalties of an ecological education is that one lives in a world of wounds. So, those of you who grew up in California and our wonderful grassy hills and sliding down in the summer on cardboard boxes and all the rest of that, you're actually living in an ecological disaster, okay? Botanically, this is called annual grassland. What it means is it's basically degraded pasture land, and all that brown is weeds. It's mostly grasses from Europe, wild oats and the bromes. There's a lot of Italian thistle in there. There's mustard in there. It's a witch's brew of weeds. And I have always been fascinated with, I've heard about these stories of the California grasslands and the meadowlands, and I've read John Muir, and when he went over, for summer in the Sierra, and when he went over Pacheco Pass and going down in the Central Valley, and the big pools of blue and yellow, and the flowers were touching the belly of the horse and all the rest of that. I never saw that, and I was just always kind of curious as where was it, where was I missing it? So, and then there's little patches you find in the hills. I was born in 1949, so I know the East Bay pretty well. And once in a while, you'll find a little pocket, maybe the size of this stage, and you'll start counting, and there's blue dicks, there's ethereal spear, there's sunflowers, there's 20 or 30 species right in an area, and then it's just, just this awful annual grassland that is so thick that it chokes out the natives. So when you look at that ecologically, how could one be and then how could the other be? How could they both be in the same world? It's confusing. So as I retired and East Bay Mud started to take down some of the ukes there, I could see that the natives were moving back in, the invasives were moving back in, and I said, I was walking along the trail and I said, I am just not willing to sit and watch that happen because I knew how it was going to come out. So I started, and we got permits and all the rest of that. So anyway, we started the project in 2016. So this is already 3 or 4 years into the project when we'd learned a lot. So this is annual grassland, and it covers a lot of the state. And California used to be, there's grasses and forbs, F-O-R-B. That word means broadleaf plants. So botanists say there's grasses and forbs. Grasses are grasses. Forbs, the common word for that is wildflowers, okay? So Judith Lowry of Larner Seeds, I don't know, if you probably buy seeds, some of you. Her license plate holder says, bring back the forblands, okay? Bring back the forblands. So California is thought to have been a vast forbland with a lot of woodland areas, vast woodland areas. So how do you convert these weedy grasslands to forbs? There's very few people who ever tried. And here's the reason, is because these are aggressive seeders, and even if you stop every grass from throwing out its seeds and every mustard and thistle, guess what? In the soil, there's a seed bank that's going to last for 1, 2, 3, or more years. And so it's a 3-year project. So let me show you the scheme we've developed for how we work this. So along the left side, you see year 1, 2, 3. So what's the major activity in year 1? Prevent invasive seed formation. I actually should have titled my talk, It's All About the Weeds, okay? It really is. If you get rid of the weeds and prevent them from seeding, the natives will gradually come back, and with a little help, well, you're going to see. So prevent seed, the method, we mow and rake. I'll show you some slides on that. We spray vinegar, very good herbicide, just the same concentration as you use on your salad. We hand weed, we spring mow before seed formation. Year 2, basically the same thing. We exhaust this invasive seed bank, we vinegar spray, we hand weed, and we start planting a few natives. And in year 3, I should say, exhaust the seed bank, and then we sow more seeds from local seed banks and focused planting, spray again, and weed. And so one of the things about a good restoration project is you have a good idea of where it's going. In other words, I was talking to a woman during the break, and she has a big patch of coyote brush and wondering, what about that? And I said, well, is that coyote brush, is that moving back to woodland? Because a lot of our woodland was cut down in the 19th century. It was a big deal because the society ran on wood. If you're a rancher like my family up in Sonoma County, you cut down the trees, you sell the firewood, and then you have open land and you can graze animals. So at that time it was economical. So California did a lot of that, more of that than I think anybody would probably ever want to admit. But at any rate, back to the focus there. So I'm going to walk through what we do there, and but the problem is at that seed bank. It's that seed bank. It's that seed bank. And so here we go. So we're back to the swale. So the first thing we do is we mow it down with weed eaters, and then we rake all that herbage off. And that removes a lot of seeds already. So here's a couple slides on that. So we've mowed it, now we're raking it down the hill. We make little berms. And this is what an area looks like after we've mowed and raked it. So we got halfway down the hill, we had to put in a little path. And there's that berm of all that dry grass. And then comes the vinegar spray, okay? Now, I was a kid and I had an uncle who moved to New York City, and I went to see Radio City Music Hall. And you know who dances there? The Rockettes, okay? These are the Sprayettes, okay? So that's Mary, Cynthia, Samantha, Francesca, and Pam. And we have a great spray team, and East Bay Mud gives us the freedom to spray the vinegar. They buy it for us, and we spray it out. And so here is what vinegar looks like. If you spray it right after the rains when the weeds are small, it's a very light touch, breaks down into water and carbon dioxide, so it doesn't change anything. It's the safest thing you could possibly use. And here's what you get. So on the left side, that was sprayed with vinegar a week before, and on the right, that wasn't sprayed. And here is Italian thistle, one of the weeds we love to hate. On the right side is an Italian thistle that was sprayed a week before, and we dug it up. And you see there's no root hairs, and on the left is the dead one. On the right is a thistle that we just excavated right before the photograph. You can see all those root hairs. For some reason, and it's an annual, you hit that with vinegar, and the whole plant just dies. So one of the things that you will learn, or I have learned, because I've been in the business so long, is that there's a lot of nonsense that goes on in the nursery business and the gardening business. And sometimes I will say in my more cynical times that the mainline nurseries are a clever way of separating the people from their money, okay? Because things are made so complicated. They don't have to be complicated. If you plant local native plants, if you plant them small and use sensible, low cost, you can do a garden for $5,000 that commercially would cost you $50,000. So you can save a lot of money if you use some common sense and you have a little bit of knowledge. Anyway, okay, then we get into hand weeding. So we have a lot of people here. I'll show you the numbers on our volunteers. And we spray, and then sometimes it needs hand weeding because there's actually a few good plants that pop up. We call this the work of the ants. Get it? We're the ants, and a little bit, and pulling this weed, and all together, it kind of adds up. So this is that same swale after 1 year. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. No weeds went to seed. There were a couple little lupin plants we found when we mowed it out, and now there's a few more. They're starting to come up now that they don't have that competition that smothers them for light and water. And so it's beginning to, that really looks good to me. Now, there's a steep slope going up there, and we're going to go up that slope, and we're going to fast forward 2 years, and we're going to look down on the swale. Okay, here we go. So the swale is way, way, way down there in at the top of the screen. This is 150 feet down in elevation, and this is the top. And you can kind of see there's something's going on down there in the swale. And now we're going to go to the far end of the swale. We're going to look back and look at that. So over at the very far right, you see a little patch of green. That's the before picture. That's what this whole thing would have looked like if we hadn't come in. And then here's so isn't that amazing? I mean, this is only 3 years. This is April 18th, 2023. Now, people say, well, did you bring all those things? Was that all there? So the lupin was all there, and that just came back in spades once we removed the competition. The poppies were basically all there in one area. We gathered some seeds, we grew out some little plugs, and we put them in. And then the tidy tips. Okay, so tidy tips. We're going to go forward a couple things. I know of, like I say, I think I know the East Bay pretty well. I know of 5 patches of tidy tips that grow in the East Bay, in the whole East Bay, okay? There's one up on the East Bay mud side of Volmer Peak. There's one in Las Trampas. There's one down in Pleasanton Ridge. and there's 2 on Mount Diablo. And so our rules here, we're in the volcanic high ridge zone, and a good restoration project only uses local plant material to keep the genetic diversity. And so the volcanic ridge area, it's 4 miles long and it's a half a mile wide, so that's our nursery. So we went over to the other side of Volmer Peak. We gathered maybe 50 tidy tip seeds. And we started some colonies here, and at home we grow big pots to generate a lot of seed. And we made some patches, and this is now in the 2nd year of the tidy tips. In the first year, you get a little patch this size. It's always windy, the seeds blow out. Well, look at that. So we're going to look at a few plants that are in that, just a couple of close-ups here. So here's the silver lupin. This was a little bit earlier on in the season because this one blooms in February and March. I think this is another Kathy picture. And then here's one of my favorites. This is the tidy tips, so it's a little aster. So Doug was talking about, habitat and pollinators. So if you go back to that picture of that dried grass, grass is wind pollinated. It doesn't rely on insects. And so as a friend of mine who does a similar project out in Walnut Creek at the Fossil Hill, he says, look at all that grass. That means California has 1,600 species of native bees. That grass means nothing to a native bee. So we bring back, that means a lot to native bees, okay? An awful lot. So that's tidy tips. And we noticed in the first year with all those flowers, we weren't getting a lot of insects, but the 2nd year we're getting a lot more, and the 3rd year, oh my gosh, So the insects aren't fools, they're not just sitting there waiting for something to happen, And so once we restore the habitat, then you can see how that they follow in. And then here is Willie Mule's here, and that's our black-tailed bumblebee. That's a pretty common bumblebee in the early season. And these mule's ears we grew from seed. We planted them out in the first year. They had 2 little tiny leaves. They don't bloom for 4 years, and this is year 4, and they finally bloom. So, patience is a virtue. So here's, it's an all-volunteer project. I'm a volunteer. I have the background to kind of organize something. But here's what we did last year. We had 110 work days. We go out twice a week, Thursday afternoon, Sunday morning. You're all invited to come help. We did 1,177 shifts, 3,500 hours on site. And this year, we're expected to hit over 4,000, and we're already ahead of that pace. So it really is the work of the ants, and so many people just putting in their time, and it is so fulfilling to be out in a big landscape. Kathy mentioned I restored my whole garden with local native plants, and so I was kind of looking for a little bit bigger stage, So here we go. I wanted to go back to the sprayers here, the sprayettes. So we encourage volunteers to take on a piece and make it their own project. And so last year, Mary here, this is the quality of people that we're attracting. Mary was high up in Levi Strauss. She went all around the world setting up factories for them. Mary came out 119 times last year for at least a 3-hour shift, okay? Cynthia was in environmental compliance at East Bay Mud. She came out 99 times last year. The one in the middle is Samantha. We lost her to the Forest Service up in Redding. Francesca is in red there. She retired at age 60. She worked at the Lawrence Lab because she wanted to do trail work while her body was still in good shape. And 5 years later, she's still doing trail work, And Pam, she worked in environmental compliance for Contra Costa County. So we're attracting really high-quality people who make this a passion. And what Kathy said about community, the little secret about us is we make a big deal about having snacks together at the end. And I'm here to confess that we're actually a snack club. And we're just posing as nature lovers, okay? So we got the attention of the Park District with this project. This is East Bay mud. Now we're going to regional parks. We got them out to see these meadows last year. We had 35 different people from the park district out to look at it, including the entire stewardship department and 2 of their assistant general managers came out and 2 of their board members came out, and they want to do the same thing. And so this year now they've started a Sibley Meadow project at Sibley Regional Park. It's meeting once a month. Several of you, I know Eileen, Toku, others are part of that project, and I'm helping out with that. And they're going to be starting next year a similar project at Miller Knox up in Richmond. And so we're hoping that the virus is spreading. You know, I see a hand up there. I'll get to you. We're also doing, we do teach a seminar in ecological restoration, and it's every other week for a half a day. It starts in November, goes all the way through the cycle through June. Last year, Kathy and several other people, BJ, Janet were part of this, Kelly was part of it. And this year, we're doing 20 people. It's full with a waiting list, and we have 6 full-time rangers from the Regional Park District doing the project. And so what I see is our role now is we've proven that it can be done, and now we have to train people in how to do that. So, yeah. I'll wrap up here in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to show you just the beginnings of the Sibley project. So this was a meadow with a lot of potential, but also heavily encroached by coyote brush. So they have contractors in there taking out a lot of the coyote brush and reopening the meadow. It's a natural meadow. And work days, once a month, we're getting 25 people out or more. So we're hand thatching because it's very delicate. We can't go in there and mow. There's too many rocks and too many nice plants. And here's the crew at the end of the day. And volunteer. Okay. Was there really a question up there? Go ahead.
Could fire be used instead of all the vinegar?
Fire could be used in the summer, but good luck doing fire right next to the city. We had a bad experience with that in 1991. So it could be the point is fire could be used in the summertime to replace mowing and raking, but it wouldn't do anything to the seed bank because in fire the heat goes up and it doesn't, unless it's really hot, it doesn't affect the seeds in the ground. So fire can be used. Phil and I out in Walnut Creek started using a flamer out there. We actually started a fire that we didn't expect. And then we quickly put it out and didn't tell anyone. Okay. Can we take a couple questions? Yeah, okay.
Do you use straight vinegar or do you dilute it?
Well, what you buy in the store as household distilled vinegar is 5% acetic acid, and that's what we would use, okay? Because of agency rules, we buy a stronger version at 20% because it's a registered product, and then we mix it with water and we bring it back to 5%, okay? Yeah. Oh, there are a lot of questions
Can
here.
I just say too
Yeah,
that
Kathy.
I've used vinegar, I'm gardening on my neighbor's rental property, and I've used the same vinegar, just like go to Rayleigh and get a gallon of vinegar with a squirt of dish soap, and Mike bought me my own backpack sprayer, and it works on oxalis incredibly well. And now that this conference is over, I'm going to be spraying my neighbor's yard next week, and you can just see such a difference in the oxalis and how it really is beaten back by the vinegar.
Kathy, do you have to add the soap to that or is it
There's a product that is really good to add to a spray, and it's called a spreader sticker or a surfactant. And what it does, if you put a drop of water on a leaf, it'll make a little bead. And if you add a little bit of soap, like a tablespoon of laundry soap or dishwashing soap to a gallon of spray, it will reduce the surface tension, and that bead will spread out and it will cover the whole leaf.
You use dishwashing soap? I've been using Dawn dish soap. Yeah.
Dawn is good. Dawn is good. There's commercial products, there's organic products, but you don't want to put salt in unless you're doing your driveway and doing cracks. So it's just vinegar and something to just get that bead to spread out and cover the whole leaf. Yeah, okay, let's go here.
Can you talk some more about the coyote brush? Because I'm the one from the foothills
Yeah.
that has that in my pasture, and I was wondering where to go from there.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that?
Okay, this is actually a bigger question, because in ecological restoration, this is the definition, is the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. Okay, it's assisting the recovery of an ecosystem. So what is the ecosystem that has been damaged, degraded, or destroyed that you're helping to assist? Do you have coyote brush in an area that used to be a woodland and now hasn't been grazed and the brush is coming back? Or do you have coyote brush coming into an area that would naturally be a meadow, which are very rare in California, usually thin soil at the top of a ridge? East Coast would call that grassy balds. So you have to have the concept of where you're going, because if you're going to take out your coyote brush and maybe try to make a meadow, but that land really wants to be a woodland, you are buying yourself a passela worry. You know what I mean? So that's all I can say in the short time, but have the concept of where you're heading, and then you're moving with the energy, you're moving with the flow. Otherwise, you're just going to be constantly pushing against big plants that want to get into an area that has deep soil and plenty of water. Yeah. So let's go over. Yeah, there. Yeah.
When you guys break it all down and you've got your swales of seed bank stuff, where does all that matter go?
We just leave it in berms, and in 2 or 3 years, that will rot down, and then that becomes weed-free mulch.
So the seeds that you break up don't just sprout like what are
In the berm of the thatch, they'll be so deep that they'll just sprout and die, and a few of them will come up, and we just pull those out or give them a shot of vinegar. So working in big areas, we don't have the luxury of bringing in like a mulch like you do in a home garden, in a city garden, and so we have to find some place to put that. And so our solution is to make hedgerows or stuff it under the coyote brush and feed the rabbits and let that just rot down. Boy, there's so many questions. Okay, let's go way over there.
Could you comment a little bit more about why you don't use 30% vinegar, the egg vinegar, and you use 5%?
It's a waste of money. You don't need 30%. 30% is getting into a danger zone. It can burn you, and so our 20% vinegar costs us basically $12 a gallon. Okay, that's wholesale. If we can divide that by 4, it's $3 a gallon. Why wouldn't you save that money if you're just wasting your time?
With one application?
Basically, 1.1 application. One application will take the broadleaf weeds out and some of the grasses, and then you see where the spots are, and you go back and you hit them again. Yeah. Let's see. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, in the white.
Do you ever use goats for that initial clearing?
Goats are like a nuclear bomb. They take everything. But in that Miller-Knox area, they had goats on the ridge last year, and they did the work of mowing and raking. So one-time use of goats, if it's a meadow and everything is pretty much dormant, that would be okay. But beyond that, they just wouldn't work because they eat everything. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What time of year do you use your first spray, and do you do it again?
Well, let me ask you that back. What time do you think we would do it?
Because of the rains, it makes the vinegar less effective. So you don't want to do it right after it rains. But you also don't want to wait for the weeds to become very prolific.
Exactly. So in California, when we get our first big rains, it's like New Year's Day and the first day of spring all wrapped together, okay? And so we've had that now. And so we will wait probably until December, and we will look, do we think most of the weeds are up? Because you want to wait until they're all up so you can spray them, but you don't want to wait too long where they get big and it won't be so effective. So usually we do a lot, or most of our spraying in December and January.
So you do twice.
Once we'll get most of it, and then we'll come in and spot spray. Those Italian thistles I showed you, that was from mid-February, but in other words, you want to be efficient. You want to have as little leaf surface as possible to do as much, to be as effective as possible. But you don't want to do it too early, because if you do it too early and then another big rain comes, you get a whole extra raft of seeds. So it's an art.
Yeah, when you're in the fire-prone regions like we are, we have to constantly go out and whack down the weeds. It could be once, it could be twice, it could be 3 times, it could be 4 times.
Yeah.
So if you're doing your spray once, you probably need to do it twice or 3 times, or then just go out and get your big ones.
Yeah, so just a quick answer is after the rains, after you get a good crop of weeds, usually mid-December through the end of January is the best time to spray.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So any others? Yeah, there's a hand here.
Yeah, the pictures that you showed us, the after pictures of the skyline, quote, restoration, do you think that represents what that would have looked like before Europeans? Or essentially, are we creating I want to say almost a painting with tools of California natives? That makes sense.
Well, let's see. Do we have another hour here? It's a really good question. And you know what? We don't really know the answer to that. I would say in my heart and from all the science I know, we're getting pretty close. But like someone else said, a garden is constantly moving. And the best description I can give you of the process is it's like a dance, you know. We make a move, you make a move, your partner makes a move, your partner makes a move, you respond. And we didn't think we were going to have, half of that swale taken over by silver lupin. But silver lupin only live for 5 years and then they die. So they're going to be a die-off of lupin. Will there be another crop? We don't really know, but what we do know is if we get the invasives out, we have the right ingredients. And remember the definition, it's the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem. And so we're assisting, but we have to be sensitive to what this other whole business is really wanting to be. And there's not a clear answer, and so we just do our best. Yeah. Okay, now the hands are coming up. Okay, yeah.
A rather dreamy question. What's the scale that this could be done at if there were infinite funding? The whole world.
Oh, okay, so you should all, in addition to Skyline Gardens, you should go home and Google Fossil Hill at Walnut Creek Open Space, because they have done about 8 acres. And Phil Johnson, who's an old friend of mine, former landscaper, and it's right next to the city, on Walnut Boulevard near Walnut Heights School. And it's on a ridge, and you can see all the way to the top of Mount Diablo. And people say, Phil, how far is this going? And he says, all the way to the top. Okay. I mean, that's what we should do. If the funding were available, we're working out the techniques for the next generation. And, the regional parks has 80,000 acres of grassland. Well, why shouldn't that all be restored? There's no good reason, except it's too hard and it's too expensive. Well, those aren't good reasons.
Glenn, you have said that the cost of East Bay Mud for this project is a couple of $100 a year. With you and 40 people or something volunteering? Is that?
Yeah. Their cost. They spend about $2,000 a year on vinegar, and we provide the rest. And the rest of our budget is about $1,000. So there's enough hands in California to pull every weed. We just have to figure out how to get them all organized. Okay.
Part of this is not just, you're talking about the cost, it's not just the dollar cost, it was getting permission from the East Bay Regional Park District or any other land manager to allow a volunteer-led project like this that's also staffed by volunteers to work on the property. And so that's different from thinking about, well, we have to have like $1 million to restore 8 acres. It's getting the agencies to approve it and then getting, you know, the public, us, to be willing to tend the wilds and make it happen.
Let me, before I take more questions, and Kathy, you watch the time, okay? Okay, so some of you may know about a former governor of Louisiana by the name of Huey Long. He was a famous populist. He was, you know, shot down. And Louisiana in the Depression was a really, really, really poor state. And he got the legislature to approve 50 miles of paved road for the state of Louisiana. And they thought he was going to pave from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. But what he did was he paved 2 miles out from all of the 20 major cities. And then the paved road stopped. And you know what everybody says? Well, we got to connect it up. He says, well, we need the money, okay? You get it? So we're showing it can be done. We're going to get some other projects going, and then the public is going to see that, and then hopefully things will start to move, and the public will do this. And so if you've lived how I have, and I think we've had a pretty good demonstration of how far native plant culture has moved in 20 years with Kathy at the helm, you know, why shouldn't it move 3 times this far or 10 times this far in the next 20 years? You know, there's no reason why it can't. It's just how we think about it, what's important to us, and what's important, we're voters, and then voters ultimately decide where the money comes from. And you know, and so I'm super optimistic, okay? Yeah, so 2 more questions. Doug, yeah, you got a question.
All these grasslands are abandoned rangeland. If so, how much rangeland remains in California?
Oh, well, I think you had a figure. No, they're not all abandoned. Most of them are grazed. Most of them are grazed too hard, but yeah, I'd say a quarter of the state of California is grazed grassland, mostly blue oak and valley oak woodland, because those are deciduous trees, so the grass can grow under the trees. The Park District grazes 70 or 80,000 acres. There's reasons for doing that for fire. It's complicated, but basically there's no, like you said about native street trees, there's really no good reason why it can't be done. You know. Okay, one more question over here. Yeah, straight to you.
How do folks get involved in the Miller Knox
You could email me at Skyline Gardens, and I could put you in touch with the ranger out there. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.